All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the video. And as you see on the screen, we are doing Leviticus chapter 2. And let's begin with the reading, shall we? And anyone when offering a grain, meaning a grain offering, to Yahweh of fine flour shall be his offering, and he shall pour on it oil and put on it frankincense. And he shall bring it to the sons of Aaron the priests, and one of whom shall take from it a handful of fine flour and oil, and with all the frankincense, basically everything that's mixed in with it, and he shall burn it. The priest shall burn it as a memorial on the altar, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to Yahweh. Again, Yahweh applies to Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And the rest shall be of the grain offering, Aaron's and his sons. It is the most holy of the offerings made by fire to Yahweh. So this offering, this grain offering, is the most holy made by fire. Now that is very important. Okay, so we have bird offerings, we have goat offerings, we have lamb offerings, for Pete's sake. And yet somehow this grain offering is the most holy. So let's look at why it's most holy. So let's look at what is said here. The grain offering, minha, detailed in Leviticus 2, that's where we're at, is described as most holy. Kodesh, Kodasim. The term of highest sanctity referred for items in the nearest sphere of Yahweh's ownership, such as inner sanctuary, atonement offering, and the Day of Atonement sacrifice. The grain offering is considered most holy for what reasons? Unlike typical holy offerings that could be eaten by an unclean Israelite, the most holy grain offering were restricted to Aaron's priests and had to be consumed in the holy place, the court of the tent of meeting. So that's one reason. Basically, ordinary people could not eat it. When a small memorial portion was burned on the altar, the remaining part was still considered most holy, meaning it carried the sanctity of the altar and could transfer the holiness to whatever it touched. So imparted sanctity. Imparted means transferred. Symbol of covenant fidelity, salt. The mandatory inclusion of salt, known as salt of the covenant, that we will see in this chapter, Leviticus 2:13, we will see that here just shortly, symbolized the enduring, incorruptible, and permanent nature of the covenant between God and Israel. And I would venture to guess that it's not by accident that this is talking about salt. And what does it say in the New Testament? We are to be salt of the earth, right? Another reason it's most holy is that it has no leaven or no honey in it. It's purity and separation. The prohibition of, or the rule against leaven or yeast with honey, which both ferment or spoil, symbolized a requirement for purity and separation from corruption, reflecting the sinlessness required in approaching God. So again, we're going over the reasons why it was most holy. The fine flour, represents the result of grueling, painstaking work, representing the dedication of one's entire life and labor to God. So as you see, there's a lot of symbolism going on. Okay, imparted sanctity, meaning that the grain offering transferred the holiness of the grain that was tossed on the altar, and that holiness transferred to the grain that was not on the altar, and anyone who touched that grain would be considered holy, kind of thing. uh, kind of like cleansing, if you will. I don't particularly fully get that one necessarily of transferred holiness from the altar. Um, that's just me. But I mean, I don't get, aside from like the closest thing I can think of about imparted sanctity is Christ imparting his holiness to us. That's the part I do get. Um, and in here, right, we see that the flower, the painstaking work would represent the work of someone's entire life in labor to God. So very similarly, uh, how much work you put into. So I guess kind of like the equation between how much work you put into doing something like this and what it represents when it deals with your life on how you put so much work into your life to make it sacred before God. And then the next one is typology. Significance. The grain offering symbolizes sinless, perfect life of Christ, the bread of life. Makes sense because that's what bread is made out of. It's made out of uh, the grain. And by giving the most holy remainder to the priests, God directly provided for his servants, linking the sustenance of the ministry to the holiness of offering itself. So that's the basic gist. So I just wanted to give that to you guys. Okay. But nevertheless, this word right here, Kodesh Kadesim. Kodesh Kadesim. It is most holy of the offerings. And if you bring in as an offering grain baked in the oven, that means if you bring something that is brought as a grain offering. So this would be like I make a pie, I make a cake, anything made with grain or flour, and it's already cooked. Fine flour cakes, it shall be unleavened, which means you should not use yeast mixed with oil or wafers, unleavened, anointed. Now, I do have something for you guys in this because we see a mixing of things that are holy with things that are not holy, such as yeast into bread to make it unholy, or just regular. And if you remove the yeast, it's holy before God. But if a grain offering baked in a pan, so if it's an offering, right, you could take it. It looks like if it's unleavened and it was cooked in the oven, right. But if the grain offering was baked in a pan, your offering it shall be of fine flour mixed with oil. So one is one kind, one is another kind. Unleavened, still unleavened, it shall be. You shall break it into pieces and pour it on it oil. It is a grain offering. And if is a grain offering baked in a covered pan, your offering of fine flour, with oil it shall be made, and you shall bring the grain offering that is made of these things to Yahweh, still the Trinity, and when it is presented to the priest, and he shall bring it to the altar, and shall take the priest from the grain offering a memorial portion, a small portion basically, and burn it on the altar. It is an offering made by fire, sweet, aroma sweet to Yahweh. And what is left shall be of the grain offering of Aaron and his sons. So that would be the high priest that did this part right up here, Aaron would. His sons as well would be involved in the grain offering afterwards. And it is the most holy of the offerings made by fire to Yahweh. Any grain offering which bring to Yahweh not shall be made with leaven, shall not have yeast in it. For all leaven, all yeast, nor any honey, no honey, you can't put honey in it either. No, you shall burn from an offering made by fire. So if you find that this offering has honey or yeast in it, you shall not use it on the altar. You would defile the altar. It would be something horrendous to do. As for the offering of the first fruits, you shall offer them to Yahweh, but on the altar, not they shall be burned. You shall offer them still, give them to him. The word offer here is takribu. Takribu, if I'm saying right. To come near, approach, enter. Uh, to bring or present. That's all it means. Bring or present. Okay. It shall not be burned. They shall be burned on the altar, but on the altar not they shall be burned for a sweet aroma. And every offering of grain with salt, there's the salt part that we saw earlier in the reading, you shall season, and not you shall allow to be lacking the salt of the covenant. There's that word we heard before. Mele berit, mele berit, or mela, yeah, melak, melak berit, melak berit, okay? Salt of the covenant of your God, Elohika, from your grain offering with all your offerings you shall offer salt, mela, okay? And if you do offering a grain offering of your first fruits to Yahweh, green heads of grain roasted on fire. So the heads of the grain is green. Those have grain beaten with full heads you shall offer for the grains of the first fruits. And you shall put on it oil and lay on it frankincense. It is grain offering it, and you shall burn the priest memorial portion part as it was beaten grain, and part it with oil with all the frankincense as the offering made by fire to Yahweh. Trinity still. Okay. Now we're done with reading. Let's try to break this down for how it will apply to you. Okay. In layman's terms, in very simple terms, what that means, that's what layman means in very simple terms. When you give an offering to God of your life, you need to make sure it's not mixed with other things that are ungodly. We can see that in the world lots where people go, well, I want to make my life an honorable sacrifice unto the Lord, and I want to do this and this and this to honor Him, but I still want to mix a little bit of the world with it. Ways that this would be is, you know what, I want to watch godly movies, but I still want to watch ungodly movies. I want to listen to godly music, but I still want to listen to some ungodly music, some love songs, some country, some this, some that. Do you not realize what you're doing? Do you not realize the corruption and the impurity that you're presenting to God in doing that? Do you not realize that in essence you're trying to sit at the table of demons and also sit at the table of God? And although you are deluding yourself because you cannot do both, in actuality, according to God, you can't do both. You're still trying to. This would be the equivalent of going, I want to be on a vegetarian diet, but every now and then I'm going to eat a little bit of meat. Well, now I'm polluting my sacrifice of trying to be a vegan in the first place. I can't call myself a vegan now because I've now polluted my path of eating no meat with eating a little meat. Now, granted, I'm not a vegan, but you get the idea. I just use that as an example. But in the spiritual realm, this would take on a lot more deeper context in our lives. Because we find ourselves doing this a whole lot in our days. We find ourselves mixing things of the world, enjoyments of the world, with the things of God. And this is not how it should be, my friends. This is not how God wants it to be. He wants our grain or our offering of our life that we give to our sacrifice of our life. Now, I will use the offering word more than the sacrifice word. Because remember, God says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. It's not your works that, in this case, it's not your works that that make God accepting of you going to heaven. or anything like that. Because this part that I'm talking about here has nothing to do with going to heaven. This is solely about what you choose to do in regards to your life afterwards, after you've been saved, after God has came into your life and molded it and changed it. This is more leaning towards the path of how God has molded it. Meaning, don't let God, or I should say, don't let God, because that would include you willfully choosing to allow God, because technically you still have free will to say no. Although I can't imagine many Christians saying no to God. But nevertheless, you still have free will to say no. So this would be you letting God have full reign over your life and saying, God, here's all the areas of my life. Change whatever you want. Get rid of whatever you want. Versus you going, well, these sections of my life I want to keep impure. I had somebody say it to me this way one time, and it boggled my mind that this person claimed to be a Christian but still said this particular statement to me. Now, I will set up for you the discussion of how this took place. And what had happened was I was in the lobby, and up to this point, I was playing. I decided in my life to play Christian games. Right. This is when the transformation of Christian games took place in my life. And I actually just the other day I got rid of my last two games that didn't have to do with God. They were like one was like they were both games that had to do with like acting out specific words. So like categories or something like that where you gotta just act it out. But I had two of them left and I got rid of them, thankfully. So all praise to God for that. But the idea is I was down there and this particular woman, older lady, likes a game called Farkle. Farkle. Well, if you don't know what that is, it is you just basically roll dice and you try to play a game of trying to score points. Very much a dice game mixed with competition. Who can get the higher points? Who can hit 10,000 points first? Not a bad game necessarily. Just like Bible says, everything's permissible, not everything's beneficial. This is not a game that's beneficial, but it is a game that's permissible, nevertheless. And compared to some of the other games out there, such as Mortal Kombat and all these violence games, it's still a decent game. It's kind of like Monopoly. But when I reported to the group that was down there at that time that I'm no longer going to be playing all ungodly games whatsoever, that means no more spades, no more rummy, no more Farkle, right? That I was only strictly going to be playing biblical games only. The words I heard in my mouth was, no, 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 no. You can keep a little bit of evil, or specifically, you can keep a little bit of sin. When I mentioned that it's sin to me because it's not focused on God, that was her words. You can keep a little bit of evil if you want. I'm like, you're supposed to be a Christian, and you're supposed to be trying to focus on doing the things of God. And yet you want to say that it's perfectly fine to keep a little bit of bad. That would be the equivalent of me going, you know what? I'm gonna get rid of anger and hate and stealing and cussing and this and that. But let me just keep a little bit of this lust over in the corner. It doesn't make much sense. Like, well, why are you even trying to be a Christian then? Because isn't God supposed to have full reign of your life? So I hope you get the ideas. I hope you get the point of this. Okay. Let our offerings that we make to our God be holy and sacred. Something truly set aside by God, not something that is evil and disgusting because it's been polluted with the leaven of the world. Don't be tricked. Don't associate any part of your life with the leaven of the world. In other words, the corruption of the world. Be blessed and go with God. Thank you for listening.